right? But truth has to be told for health to happen. So, how do you protect that injured heart? You avoid mention of, deny, or forget, and that forgetting can be part of the PTSD experience, or if it's gone on as a pattern that has become normal to a people, a multi-generational trauma experience. The original medical term for an addict alcoholic was chemically dependent, as I've said. So, any person who was in a primary relationship with a chemically dependent person was called codependent in that language. So what Terry is basically saying in this dysfunctional is not non-functional. People go on with their life, but they go on in pain. And they basically act in characteristic patterns as a result of that pain. So because he's native and because our native healing modalities require that you go to the emotions first, particularly with pain. Where are you hurting? How deep is it? How do we heal the wound properly? So dysfunctional is not non-functional. It's functioning in the presence of pain. So, because of this pain, there are 3 rules that are learned in codependent families. They're not necessarily written down, but this is basically from the classic literature. Don't talk about what's wrong. If you don't talk about it, it's not happening. Don't trust. They lie, and they let you down. So don't talk about what's wrong. Don't trust because people lie. And then they let you down when they promise things. And don't feel. I'm fine. F-I-N-E. Fine. Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. How are you doing today? I'm fine. I didn't ask you how you look. I asked you how you were. So, yeah, this is a 16-year-old white female explaining how she felt when her parents bought the line that her injury from her suicide attempt was a cat scratch. I have a lion's claw and a bear claw. I'll show you. That was a cat scratch. It was a lion that did the scratch. So, you know that emotional equation I gave you? A minus E in brackets multiplied by N equals depression. That came from her. She thought that up. It was basically an equation for suicide. So everybody understands about pain, suicide being depression and pain and all that kind of stuff. So she essentially was made to go to church every day, which wouldn't be so bad in itself. But she was in a primary relationship with a recovering addict who was a death rocker, who was clean and sober. But her way of rebelling was basically being in a relationship with him. Good Christian girl, bad boy. Right? But not too bad, because he's not an addict or alcoholic. He's in recovery. He's going to meetings every day, etc., etc. And he's trying to get her to talk about her feelings about being kind of shut in within this particular family. And so she said, so she comes in one day wearing a bandana, like, what is this, a gang thing? No. Takes the bandana off, there's this scratch. Like, how did you miss the arteries? This is deep. And it's like that wide. Cat scratch? So, you know, okay, suicide, I have to at least call the parents the nurse, I'm right next to the nurse, so can you bandage that up? Because this bandana is like dirty. Can we medically, right? So parents said, thank you. It's just a cat scratch. Really? So she didn't come back for 3 months. I had to do what I had to do, right? She said, I'm going crazy. They actually bought that. My parents actually bought that. And she's actually good today. I've seen her in the last decade or so, but it's what I had to go through. Okay, but it would have been easier to acknowledge the pain without inflicting it on yourself. So that's one of the pieces about addictive behavior. People are destroying themselves unless they resolve and correctly heal the pain. They engage in behaviors that are destructive, self-destructive. So recovery, so there are codependent rules, and one of the rules is the recovery can be found by any family member at any time, and that consists of breaking the rules. You can't break the rules to know how to play the game. So breaking that rule, those 3 rules: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Talking, you break one of the rules by talking about, and you basically have to be selective about where you talk, what you talk about, and with whom do you talk about it. Generally speaking, you need to talk with a skilled person or a person who is going through similar stuff as you, who has made some steps toward truth-telling. Most people, I'm sorry to say this, but I just have to be blunt from people's experience. Okay? Most civilians are not trained to deal with heavy stuff unless they've been going through heavy stuff themselves. And for the most part, if you've gone through heavy stuff or you've been talking with people who've gone through heavy stuff, usually the people talking to you have gone through way heavier stuff than you have, and all they need is a listening ear. And for you not to react and freak out so that you can hear it. If they choose you to basically disclose whatever they disclose to. So when I'm training, not only civilians, but peer helpers, okay? If you feel out of your depth, like this is over your head, bring it to somebody who's skilled with it. Okay? You can develop the skill, because most of the skill is listening. The problem can clear by itself just by listening and talking them through the processes that they need to go through to heal it. Now, unfortunately, with addicts and alcoholics, this means they have to give up their best friend, which is the drug, which means they'll probably have to go through withdrawal, which will be painful and uncomfortable. And that alone, the pain and the uncomfortableness of going through withdrawal, is enough to stop them. But it has to be gone through to get to the other side. Stopping using is easy. It's stopping using that's hard. All right? So, breaking the rules by talking. Where, what, and who with who. Trusting. Knowing who to trust and how far you can trust them. Cynically speaking, you can always trust people to act in their own self-interest. This can actually give you an advantage. But some people actually use the information against you. So you got to know who to trust. And, knowing what you feel, so this is the feel part, Knowing what you feel and how to meet your needs without being needed to be needed or overly needy. Now this is basically talking from a codependent point of view. Some people in codependent relationship with addicts actually need the addict to stay sick so that they have somebody that needs them, that they can take care of them. Now that may sound sick, but that is like so normal. Is like, you know, the addict gets clean and sober and doesn't need you to take care of them in that way anymore. That freaks you out. It's very similar as a parent to the empty nest. What are we without having parents in our lives on a day-to-day basis and having kids to need us? Who are we when we aren't that anymore? Well, you have to find out who you are without that relationship. Like, that means knowing who you are to yourself. I know that could be scary, but fear is the indicator that you need to run right through it. Attack it with skill. So, breaking the rules, talking, trusting, and knowing what you feel. And knowing how to meet your own needs without needing to be needed or being overly needy. In this, people are often scared of being lonely. So there's a difference between being lonely and solitude. Solitude, you choose to be alone because that's a place of power for you. Loneliness, you fear being alone because you need other people as part of your identity. Should I say that again? You get that? Solitude is choosing to be alone because you can know yourself in a place of power. Loneliness is needy. You need other people to validate you. And it's not a place of power that solitude is. Think nobody wants you? Try missing a car payment. All right, so these classic roles that I'm going to share with you that basically came out of the alcohol literature are survival adaptations. They're roles to cope with the stress the family is undergoing. They are not selected by choice. Basically, you adapt to them by adapting to the situation. They can appear in the absence of chemical dependency. So remember, the model was developed for alcohol, observing how nuclear families operated under the rules of alcoholism. So not everybody's in a nuclear family. But you will notice in addictive organizations, they talk about, oh, we're family. Like you should run. Well, I know you probably have to work for them, but okay. Yeah, well then who's daddy, who's mommy, and where are the family secrets, who is the odd uncle? Yeah. Bad boundaries. So these roles can appear in the absence of chemicals in response to any major stressor, disease, illness, including mental illness, abuse, surviving abuse, systemic discrimination, you name it. So there are, within addictive organizations and within these particular family structures, there are boundary violations of all kinds. Developing the qualities of resiliency, so that's your ability to bounce back or resist, help you through these stressors. Reestablishing boundaries which were violated or non-existent. So as an example, in my role here, in my first years here, my predecessor relapsed because 1, he wasn't doing his 12-step self-care. 2, he didn't enforce the industry standard rules that were appropriate for this organization. which are federal. So as an example, here's what the rules were when I basically started changing the policy. I wanted to basically do an abstinence policy during work hours. Very simple. Don't use at all unless it's prescription. And even then, this is before medical marijuana. And even then, simple principle. Well, no, Mark, we don't want people slurring their speech, going to Mozzie's and this is an actual quote. We don't want people going to Mozzie's having a carafe of wine and, running afoul of your policy because they're slurring their speech. And I'm being nice because I'm in the boardroom, so I have to be nice. This is faculty council, but inwardly I'm thinking, you fool. If they're slurring their words, they already cannot drive a motor vehicle. If they're too drunk to drive, should they be in front of a classroom? Who drinks and comes to work? What part of professional did you guys not get? I couldn't say that. I thought it, though. So I go like this. Okay, we can go like this. And we also have a culinary program, so sometimes we serve beer and wine. And yeah, what's next? A brew pub on campus? You think I'm joking? Wish I was.
They have one of these on campus now.
Yeah, I know. You're thinking of doing one here. Anyway, here's what the federal policy is. Okay? Thou shalt not use street drugs. Okay? Thou shalt not abuse alcohol. But it doesn't give a specific blood alcohol level, and it doesn't define abuse, even though there is a legal definition of what abuse is and a medical definition of what abuse of alcohol is. So wait, this is the same drug laws that affect Congress? No wonder we have a problem. Okay, so here I just decided to tighten it up. Okay, here's what abuse is. Exceeding legally drunk. Here's a handy dandy chart that you guys have seen that determines that. If you've drunk this dose of alcohol in this amount of time, you know how much you weigh, boom, boom, boom. That's exceeding the federal policy. So I made the policy tighter. You can't drop below the federal norm, but there's no reason that you can't go tighter. I would rather have an abstinence policy for all workers and students on campus, period. They wouldn't let me do that. Okay, then let's define abuse. So, there we are. So, establishing boundaries, which are violated or non-existent, right? So that's on the college level. On your level, you have to decide what you will or will not stand for and say that. And basically, if you're in a situation, you enter a field that's sick, okay? I need to be truthful. This is feeling weird. Why is this feeling weird? What does this feel like? Who is this person? Oh, that looks like, whoever your stereotypical alcoholic addict or evil person that may be your dad or mom or evil cousin Albert or whatever. Okay, so reestablishing those boundaries. So, 4 typical roles children may use to adapt to stress in their family situation. So remember when these came out, maybe you don't remember, but we were still thinking the nuclear family was normal, and we were assuming heterosexual. Nuclear family, that is mom and dad and biological kids. And so one of the things that came out of this data, for some reason, where everybody else, the normal heterosexual family, was having 2.3 kids. I don't know what a 0.3 kid looks like. Don't ask me. But alcoholics tended to have 5. So I guess they split the difference and went 4. And this usually happens in birth order, but it doesn't necessarily, so I'm just going to basically give you the straight model and comment on it later.